Good morning, and praise God for his awesome care and concern for us. Isn't this a great day? I'm speaking to somebody. Thank all of you for joining us today. Thank you for those who join every week and kind of help us along with the Word of God. We believe that God is doing great things in this hour. Somebody agree along with me that God is doing great things. What the world sees as a time of famine, God said we can see as a time of plenty. So I want to help somebody. I want you to know that as we go into a word of prayer, set your heart, set your dial to watch God do more in your life today. God is in your house. God is with you. Wherever you are, the Lord is working, and that's all we have to be concerned about. I want you to bow. There's a word from God, but I want to pray first. Will you help me here? Father God, we're leaning and depending on you. Lord, I hear somebody echoing that. They need to hear that again. We're leaning and depending on you. We can do nothing without you, but you are so faithful. You are so attached and in love with us that it blows our minds sometimes how you care for us. So this morning, God, if anybody's going through, we turn our care over to you. If anybody's struggling, we ask you to step in right now. Lord, allow this word to settle into the heart that you've already prepared for it, and allow a victory to come out of that. And somebody right now, in the name of Jesus, we claim that victory. Amen. All right, we're going into the word, but claim your victory. Go with me to Judges chapter 6. Judges chapter 6. Judges chapter 6. And I'm going to begin reading at the 11th verse of Judges chapter 6. Wow, what an awesome word the Lord has today. Don't you go nowhere. Get ready for this. And the angel of Jehovah came and sat under the oak which was in Ophrah, that pertained unto Joash the Abiezrite. And his son Gideon was beating out wheat in the winepress to hide it from the Midianites. And the angel of Jehovah appeared unto him and said unto him, Jehovah is with thee, thou mighty man of valor. And Gideon said unto him, O my Lord, if Jehovah is with us, why then is all this befallen us? Sound like a question we like to ask. And where are all his wondrous works which our fathers told us of, saying, did not Jehovah bring us up from Egypt? But now Jehovah hath cast us off and delivered us into the hand of Midian. And Jehovah looked upon him and said, Go in this thy might, and save Israel from the hand of the Midian. And have I not sent thee? And he said unto him, O Lord, wherewith shall I save Israel? Behold, my family is the poorest in Manasseh, and I am the least at my father's house. And Jehovah said unto him, Surely I will be with thee, and thou shalt smite the Midianites as one man. And he said unto him, If now I have found favor in thy sight, then show me a sign that it is thou that talkest with me. Depart not hence, I pray thee, until I come unto thee, and bring forth my present, and lay it before thee. And he said, I will tarry until thou come. And Gideon went out, made ready a kid of unleavened cakes and of ephah meal, and flesh he put into the basket, and he put the broth in the pot, and brought it out to him under the oak, and presented it him. And the angel of God said, Take it, and the flesh, and the unleavened cakes, and lay them upon this rock, and pour out the broth, and he did so. Then the angel of Jehovah put forth the end of the staff that was in his hand, touched the flesh and the unleavened cakes, and there went up fire out of the rock, and consumed the flesh and the unleavened cakes. And the angel of Jehovah departed out of his sight. And Gideon saw that he was an angel of Jehovah. And Gideon said, Alas, O Lord Jehovah, for as much have I seen the angel of Jehovah face to face. And Jehovah said unto him, Peace be unto you. Fear not, thou shalt not die. Then Gideon built an altar unto Jehovah, and called it Jehovah Shalom. And unto this day it is yet in Ophrah of Abizarite. For as long as the Spirit of the Lord will allow, I want you to get this, we're going to talk from this thought. God is a bondage breaker. God is a bondage breaker. He breaks every chain. There's one clear truth in the Word of God. You can bet on this, you can keep this as a fact, and that truth is God is a God. Our God has all power in his hand. It comforts us. It brings me strength today. And it should bring you strength to know that our God has enough power to keep us and help us in any situation that we go through. The Bible is clear. There is nothing too hard for God. I want to reemphasize that to someone who still may be shaky this morning on your faith. Listen to what the Word of God says. There is nothing too hard for God. God has proven time and time again he is a miracle working God. If you need a miracle and you trust God, there is nothing too hard for God. Let me prove it to you. Genesis chapter 18 is a curious chapter. Because in this chapter, God is going to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah. And we know the story. As he is going, Abraham looks up, and verse 1 of the 18th chapter says, and he saw the Lord. But then it says, when he looked, he saw 3 men. But he knew that God had presented himself, because the text then goes on to say that the Lord was there. I want to explain that. When God comes in the form of human form, he comes sometimes disguised. We can look and see angels. We can look and see, another figure, but we will know it's the Lord because God is manifesting himself to us. It's an encounter with God. So we had sent these 3 angels to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah, but as they were talking, they were fellowshipping, all of a sudden God changed this conversation and said, where is your wife? And because surely she shall have a baby next year this time. And Sarah, who was listening, started laughing. And God heard Sarah laugh, and in that 3rd verse of the 18th chapter, the Lord said to Abraham, why did Sarah laugh and say, will I really have a child at this old age? Then God said, is there anything too hard for me? Rhetorically, God said, there's nothing too hard for me. Surely at the appointed season she shall have a child, because there's nothing too hard for me. Here's what I want you to know. Do you hear why God said there's nothing too hard for him? Somebody ought to claim right now, the appointed season. That's just letting you know God has a time when he will do the miraculous, when he will do the impossible in your life, because it looks like it's impossible for us, but not impossible for God. That's right. I'm talking to you. You can't sit there. Don't you dare take your mind off the belief that God cannot do what you need him to do. And you ought to keep an open mind to know there's nothing impossible. Sarah was old and said, how in the world am I going to have a child? God said, because there's nothing too hard for me. You need more proof. Go to Jeremiah, and you ought to see Jeremiah was a prophet, and Israel was under siege by the Assyrians. And as they were being captured along and taken off into captivity, Jeremiah was instructed by the Lord to buy a piece of property. When he bought the piece of property, Jeremiah got a little concerned. There was some doubts going. He was a prophet of God, but he said, I better pray because God, we're going into siege. Why should I keep this deed? God told him where to hide the deed. He said, yes, you're going to be taken into captivity, but I will bring my people back. That's just like God. Right now, I want somebody to celebrate. Right now, if you can, God will bring you back. And if there's somebody out there who can put in the chat, I know that's right, because God brought me back. Let somebody know we're not just making this stuff up. Some of us know we'd be the walking dead if God did not bring us back. Well, listen to what Jeremiah said. And I want you to see this. Jeremiah chapter 32, verse 17. He started out by saying, oh Lord, I know you made the heavens and the earth by your great power and by your outstretched arm, and there is nothing too hard for you. God gave a testimony. Is anything too hard for me? Jeremiah just gave a testimony where he said, God, you are the God who spoke into nothing, made it something, and created everything out of that something because of the power you have in your hand. And surely if you tell me to buy this deed, if you tell me to keep this deed because you're going to bring me back and prosper me, I am going to claim that prosperity right now. I wish I had time for somebody who is down in the dumps to claim their prosperity. I wish somebody that needed to have things brought back would claim that my God is able to do that. Because the last case is not only Jeremiah, prophet, not only God, but also Jesus Christ himself. In Matthew chapter 19, Jesus told them when the rich man came, he told the rich man, if you want eternal life, Matthew chapter 19. He said, what you have to do is go sell all you have and give some cash to the poor. The rich man went away. He would rather be rich on this side than have salvation with God. And that's when the disciples said, wow, because Jesus looked at them and said, it is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to get to heaven. And Jesus said, but verse 26 of Matthew 19, but Jesus looked at them and he said, with man, this is impossible, but with God, all things are possible. Get the scenario. The disciples were taught to respect people of wealth in high position. Jesus said, no, if they don't want salvation, he said, it's impossible for a rich man to get into heaven. So the disciples said, well, who can be saved? And in that 26th verse, Jesus said, look at me. With man, it may be impossible, but with God, it's possible. Catch this, catch this. Here's what he's saying. He's saying, I am the only one who can talk to a man who is full of greed, who is full of thinking about nothing but riches on this side. I can go into his heart and I can change a heart that is hooked on money. I can change a heart that is hooked on anything. I know I have a witness now that we understand what God was saying. That's what he meant. He said it may be impossible for some of y'all to think that I can save that person, but with God, nothing's impossible. Don't make me go there. How many know I can lift my hand and tell you that is the living truth? Because if you only knew my story, if you only knew how God saved me, I can testify that God is the only one who can change somebody's heart. Nothing we establish is impossible with God. Why do we go there? Because I have a few questions. I have a few questions of somebody pouting today. I have a few questions of somebody who's listening to me and got to be perked up again after all God has done in your life. I got a few questions for you whom God has healed and delivered and blessed. Here's my questions. Why are there so many of God's people still living without the things they desire? And worse than that, why are there so many of God's people living without the things they want and need? See, it's bad enough when you don't get your desires, but God said, I will meet your needs, but some of us don't even have our needs. Why are there so many believers still in bondage to the same sin? You've been saved a while, but the same sin gets you year after year after year. How is it that we have God who can do anything, and many of us are living lives that we do not like? How is it that you can sit there, tell me, some of you may say that I speak in tongues, I shout, I do all of this, and you still can't pay your bills? How is it that there's some of you sitting around and you know God is a healer, but you fall apart every time sickness comes? How come you trust the world more than you trust God? Here is the reason, because we found out, if we look at this text, God can do anything, but there's some of us who are in bondage to our sins because we've accepted and we're living with things that we should have gotten rid of a long time ago. And if you allow negative things to stay in your life long enough, you become in bondage to them. Not only do you become in bondage to them, you don't even realize they're there until they continue to kill you. You don't realize that because you left that thing in your life and you accepted it. How is it you're a child of God, but you're sitting there in bondage to your fears, to your struggles, to all the other things in your life, and yet you have a God who can do anything? How is it that you're telling me, I got to keep praying? You ever seen the people? I got to pray week after week. God do this, God do that. God, when are you going to come to a place that you're just standing and trusting God? He whom the Son sets free is free indeed. God made us free. He don't want us in any bondages. Galatians 5:1 said it was for freedom that Christ set us free. Galatians 5:1. So God is letting us know that freedom was what the redemption plan was about. And all of his people should be free. And yet many of us are in bondage to depression. We're in bondage to anxiety. We're in bondage to our failures, our falls, and our frustrations. We're in bondage to demonic spirits, fear, low self-esteem, things I can't do. You won't say it out of your mouth, but I can't seems to be you. Well, I never thought. Can I explain to you why we're doing it? I never thought that I would be saying something nice about the Dallas Cowboys. Never in my wildest dreams. I am a die-hard Eagles fan, and I literally don't like the Cowboys. But Jerry Jones, of all people, said something this week that needs to be repeated so you can get this message that I'm about to say. Jerry Jones was asked repeatedly after the Cowboys lost the playoff game to the 49ers. He was asked, are you going to fire your coach? What other trades are you going to make? They've been chasing him around. He gave several interviews where he said nothing. But Monday night, he said something that was on Sports Center Tuesday morning, and I caught it, and God birthed it in my spirit. You know what Jerry Jones said? Jerry Jones said when they asked him that question, he didn't talk about firing anybody, but he said, I do not want to hear again from my coaches all the stuff we got to do in the off season. Now that the season is over and the playoffs are gone, you should have taken care of those things back in game 6 or 7. He said, well, while we were letting some things stay that we should have fixed, some of our deficiencies, we wait until the playoff and they come back to haunt us. He said, we accepted stuff that we should not have accepted. And then he ended by saying, we are a great team with great players. We should be better than we are. I saw it, I felt it, I said, oh my God, I'm going to have to use Jerry Jones in a sermon. And I did not want to do it, but here it is. Can I flip that and tell you what God wants me to tell you today? We have a great God with great power. We should be better. We should have a better life than we're having. You should be doing better. How is it that you're allowing things to stay in your life that should not be there? Jerry Jones just told us why. It's because now you're in bondage to the very thing you allowed to stay. God made us fighters. You can't just sit around and allow things to be in your life trying to serve God and wonder why you don't have power. That's right, I'm talking to you. You can't sit around waiting on someone else to preach you up and to praise you up when you know God is giving you all power. You got enough power to handle anything coming in your life, but you have to learn how to drive some things out of your life and get them over to the bondage breaker, because God can break any bondage. And if God has already broken bondages in your life, what makes you think he can't break that one? If God has already been there and got you away from some stuff, I know I'm not the only one sitting here that understands there's some things I never thought I would overcome, but God has helped me overcome them. How many will testify God is that overcoming God? He breaks every chain. He breaks the bondages of anxiety and fear. There are some things I used to be afraid of. There are some things I used to go through I don't go through anymore because I let God break bondage. Some of you are accepting a second-class life when you got a first-class God. I know what's going on. You got to learn how to break those bondages. How do I get God? This is a good message for somebody to hear, or you're going to be the same way for the next 10 years. Gideon is our example. I want to call on a man called Gideon, who was a judge during the time when God's people were going through cyclic apostasy. You know what I'm talking about. There was a cycle that they went through that left them for years in this apostate state where they were trying to live for God, living any way they wanted to live and wanted God to accept it. What are you talking about, Pastor? They had the cycle. You know the cycle of the book of Judges? Let me tell you what happened. Right after Joshua, when every man was doing what was right in his own eyes, that's where we seem to be at right now, right? Every man is doing what's right in their own eyes. We found these judges were called by God to actually try to keep his people in line, because here's the cycle. God's people would serve false gods. They would then fall into bondage to a nation they should have driven out of Canaan in the first place when God told them. After they fall into bondage, then they start crying out to God. God would raise up a judge or a deliverer. God would deliver them. Their land was at rest. Once the land was at rest, you'd think they would have enough sense to stop doing what they were doing. But as soon as God gives them a little peace, they, instead of getting better, they go back to the same cycle. They go back to the same thing. Here it is again. So you know the cycle. Here's the cycle. You start serving false gods. When you start serving false gods, you get put into a bondage to the gods that you're serving. And then you cry out to God. Then God raises up a deliverer. He delivers you. The land gets rest. And you go back to the same cycle. The reason I'm saying that so many times because there's too many believers out there who are living just like the folk were in Judges. You start serving false gods. What are you talking about, Pastor? You start serving stuff that's not about God. And when I say serving, don't make me have to go into what serving is. When you allow something that is not God to be better than God, or put God in a position where he is under that other thing you're serving, you just made a God out of it. You can make a God out of things. And God said you serve them, but then you get in trouble. You know what you do then? You run and cry out to God. There's only one. And when you cry out to God, God somehow, he don't send a deliverer. He already sent a deliverer in Jesus Christ. And so you go and find your word. You find some word. You find some promises. You find some preaching. All of a sudden you get holy again. And all of a sudden God delivers you. And when God delivers you and you go back to rest, you go back to the same cycle. That's why we need to look at Gideon. Gideon gets a bad rap. Everybody's always talking about Gideon wanted God to show him stuff. Gideon wanted God to, dry the fleece, wet the fleece. Gideon never just trusted God. Yeah, but here's what you need to understand. Out of all of that, Gideon got the job done because he still got victory. And here's what the Lord said to me. We got this false, spurious doctrine out there that faith is easy. The reason so many people get depressed and so many people fall down because you heard some faith teacher tell you, all you got to do is speak the word. No, your heart got to change. All you got to do is pray the word. Just find you some word, say the word. How's that working for you? Just saying the word is not living for God. They got you thinking that it's easy to have faith, but faith is not easy. Can I get a witness? Faith is a process that you have to go through and you have to stay on top of to make sure you are still living in faith. Gideon was a person who had doubts, he had struggles, he had fears, but somehow he was able to turn them over to God through a process and get enough faith to become victorious. And that's why God told me to use Gideon. Can I tell you something? They lied to you. Everybody don't have Daniel's faith. They lied to you. Everybody can't stand in front of a roaring fire and say, if it be so, like the 3 Hebrew boys did. Everybody's not going to stand in front of a Goliath with a slingshot. No, some of us know we got to build our faith up. And here's why you should listen to me. There are more Gideons in the Bible than there are Daniels. There are more Gideons in the Bible, folk who got problems, who God still uses. Amen, somebody. There are more Gideons in the Bible. That's why we can identify with Gideon's spirit. So 3 things Gideon did. I got to hurry up and get this off for you. Gideon did 3 things in this text. Now, I can't give the whole text of Gideon because it goes from these chapters. I want to tell you where Gideon got his first victory. How he got enough sense to go from weak to warrior. To go from frightened to a guerrilla warfare. How he got enough sense to be able to stand up in front of the very things that had him in bondage and confront his fears. Are you interested? Then write this down. The first thing we need to understand is if you're going to let the bondage breaker break the bondages in your life and you're going to get better. Come on, sit up wherever you are. Listen to me, because God wants you out of that bondage. God says, too long, too many years you've been living like this. And God said, I am the bondage breaker. So how do we know that? The first thing is we have to come to the place that we come out of hiding so God can work in us. No, don't lie. Hiding just means you look one way on the outside, but on the inside, there's some things going on. Can I get a witness? We appear to be all holy and bright to folk, but there's some problems. Look at the 11th verse of our text. And there came an angel of the Lord and sat under the oak tree, which was in Oprah, that pertained to Joash, the Israelite. And his son Gideon threshed wheat by the winepress. Let's look at it. So how did Gideon get to the point with his spiritual self to be out there threshing wheat when everybody else wasn't? Well, the first thing I need to do, we need to go back and look at verses 1 through 10 so we can understand the context of how they got there. Because many times what you try to tell me is, we don't know what you're going through, and nobody knows what I had. Yeah, God already knows, because here's what the text says. The context tells us that, and the first reason Gideon found himself out there is God knows and understands what you're going through. Quit doing that. Quit appeasing yourself by acting like you're not talking to God now. Like, oh, God don't know how hard it is. Yes, he does. Here is what you're missing. As soon as God says, I know, it's synonymous with God making a plan. Soon as God says, I know, that will be a shout for you, because when God knows what you're going through, the devil knows he no longer can attack you, because once God knows, God's going to come and deliver you. Sometimes we can struggle so much over so many things and have so many problems that we accept things and live with things we should not live with, or we reject things, or we don't reach for things that God says we should be living for. We start accepting where we are instead of going where we should be. God always has our life in motion, and many of us don't get there. So the first 10 verses tell you what happened. It says that the Midianites came. God's people did evil in the sight of the Lord again. Cycle. Midianites came. 7 years they were put in bondage to the Midianites. And when they were put in bondage to the Midianites, it says Israel was hiding in caves. They would come out. As soon as they planted a crop, it said the Midianites would come down. They were like grasshoppers. They would actually take everything they grew. They would come and take everything they had. They would take their sheep. They would take their donkeys. They would take their cattle. They'd take everything. And it said they left them broke and penniless, and they would run off and hide. God's people. And I don't have time to do this analogy, guys, but there's somebody out there, you let some things be so fearful they run you away from God. You're in bondage and don't want to admit it. You're hooked. You're stuck. And the only person that can get you out is God. But watch this. It says that, but God said, I know what you're going through. God said, I will bring you out if you trust me. Be careful what voices you listen to. God is able to bring you out, because as soon as God knows, I got to explain this to you, as soon as God makes a promise, the promise belongs to you. It's like the little boy who's at basketball practice, and he was there, and practice got over, and his dad usually picks him up, so he's outside waiting on his father, and his dad said, I will pick you up today. And the coach came out. Everybody else was going home. It was getting dark outside. And the coach said, hey, well, let me give you a ride home. He said, no, my dad said he's coming. And then he said, well, it's getting awful late. Are you sure? Yep, my dad said he's coming. So the coach waited about another 20 minutes, and he said, look, you better let me take you home, because I don't know what's going on. And the coach went back inside, called the boy's house, no answer. Came out and told the young man, you better go with me, because look, I can't even get an answer at your house. The boy looked at him and said, I told you my dad said he's coming. I'm going to wait on my dad. And he sat there, and the coach then got to the point after another 15 minutes, he was just getting ready to go get the boy and put him in his car, and his dad showed up. And the boy looked at the coach and said, I told you my dad was coming, went and ran to the car. Well, the coach, trying to figure out what went wrong, ran to the car and said, hey, I tried to give your son a ride home when you didn't call. And the man said, well, I didn't have to call, because I already told my son I was going to pick him up, and I know he would be there waiting for me. Did you catch it? Many of us don't realize when God made a promise, when God said he's going to do that, we just have to stand still long enough for that promise to come into our life. Don't let circumstances, look at me, don't let things that happen in your body, things that happen in your mind, things that happen to other people stop you from trusting the God who you know made you the promise. Gideon, first of all, found out that if God made a promise, then God just told me that he knows what I'm going through. And so then the next thing that got Gideon out there, if you look at verse 8, was God also came and reminded him he was a bondage breaker. I like God. God always gives us what we want. In verse 8, he said, look, I am the Lord that called you out of Egypt. Called Israel, my children, out of Egypt. I took you out of bondage out of Egypt. I brought you forth. There's not a God or a person in Canaan that you should be in bondage to. The second thing he did is he said, remind yourself. I like what God does. If you want to get out of bondage today, start reminding yourself of some other bondages God already got you out of. Some of you are sitting there right now wondering, well, this is bad. That's because you're only focused on the circumstances now. But remember, you got a history of some things God already did, and they were miraculous when you look back over them. Sometimes when we're right in the middle of them, we don't know how miraculous that is. Can I get a witness? Somebody know if you got a miracle and you want somebody to know, let them know God already did a miracle in my life. When you look back over your life, I was sitting there when I was writing this part of my message, and there were so many instances that came through my mind. But one that flashed back, and I hadn't thought of this in a long time. We were in our old house, our first house that we had bought together when we were first married, and a big snowstorm hit. And I'll never forget, our heater went out in the middle of the snowstorm. But it was one of those snowstorms that had everything shut down. And here we were in the house, and we were praying. We were trying to stay warm, but we had 2 little kids, and we're sitting in the house, and it was getting colder and colder, and you couldn't even drive on the roads. But I remember there was a plumber that lived around the corner, a friend of ours. So I remember getting out, walking around the corner to the plumber's house, pleading my case after praying to God. Not only did the man go back with me, because he couldn't drive around there, he walked back to the house with me. We got into the house, did not have a way to get any kind of supplies. He was able to rig our heater so that it would work. And when I asked him, I said, look, I got no money. He said, I'm not going to charge you anyhow. Take care of your family. You tell me God didn't do that. God answered our prayer. We got heat, didn't have to pay for it, and couldn't have paid for it if we wanted to pay for it, because we have a God who knows how to meet our needs. And one more came to my mind when Marcia had just had her first child in the hospital, our first son. I remember we came home, everything was lovely. But she started feeling bad, and worse, and she got a fever. And we're sitting there trying to treat this and treat that. All of a sudden she said, I got to go to the hospital. I can't remember, I think she called my mother-in-law, and we were able to get to the hospital. But here's what the doctor said, that there had been some afterbirth left in her, and sepsis had set in. She had an infection that was going through her body. The doctor said, good thing we got there when we did, or she would have died. All I'm saying to you is God was the one who brought her out. Because even though we got there, you've heard of people dying from sepsis. I just believe there was a God who blessed me. Can somebody go with me? Right now, I don't care what you're going through. Can you rise up and just remember a time when God healed? A time when God supplied? A time when God was there when nobody else was there? Come on, you got some secret stuff in your mind. When you think back, come on, take away all that cloudiness of the circumstance you're in now and just remember. And because of that, faithfulness to a covenant. Judges is about covenant faithfulness. God is tired of doing everything and us not doing anything. If you look at this text, we always underestimate the power of disobedience. They were in trouble because they were disobedient. We think disobedience means nothing. We can just be disobedient, don't care. You know, we get mad at folk who judge us and folk who chastise us and folk who challenge us. But the problem is disobedience is killing you. Let me tell you some things about disobedience so you can learn that obedience is what you should be doing. Disobedience costs you some things in life. It can cost you your favor with God. Adam and Eve got kicked out of the garden. They were the only people on earth had favor with the Lord, able to name and rule everything. When their disobedience struck, we got stuck in it, but they got kicked out of the garden and they lost that favor that they had with God. Disobedience can make you lose your destiny in life. Come on, you know King Saul. He was disobedient. He was made king when the people wanted a king, but his disobedience got him to the place that he was kicked off his own throne and replaced by David. Disobedience can make you miss your promise. Oh, you better hear that one, because Moses was not able, good as Moses was, everything Moses did, it took Moses an act of disobedience. He wasn't even allowed to enter the promised land. Disobedience can cause your child to be cursed. I know you're listening now, but David sinned with Bathsheba. When David sinned with Bathsheba, the child that was born from that adulterous affair was cursed and died before they could even be born. Disobedience can cause you to ruin your life. Think about the prodigal son coming from a well-to-do family, sitting in a pig pen eating slop. How many saints out there are eating slop because they did not trust God? I tell a story all the time about a young man who was in my church, and we were praising God one day, and the service was high. Everybody was shouting all over the place, and all of a sudden, this young man came to my study after service. And you know what's really crazy? When I say young man, nice-looking young man, I thought he was coming to confess to me some things that were going on in his life. But you'll be shocked to hear what he said. It's one of the scariest things that I heard. This young man said to me, he said, I can't feel God anymore. He said, I used to come to church. And every time I heard the word of God, I would sit there, and when the invitation came forth, I'd have to grab the pews so I wouldn't run up there. And I always disobeyed God. I heard God calling me, but I wouldn't come. I wouldn't go. Well, my wife died. I didn't treat her well either. My kids are there. I didn't treat them well, so they never come to visit me. He said, right now I came to church because I really need God. He said, and I can't feel anything. When all that spirit was flying, all I'm saying to you is you better understand what obedience can do and what disobedience can do. And obedience brings blessing. I know I'm going fast, but you better follow me, because obedience is what Gideon did when he finally came out of hiding and was threshing. Look what it says. If you go to Job chapter 42, you'll find out that Job was rewarded with a double portion of everything. But we can also find out for those 41 chapters, the Bible said in all of this, Job did not sin. But if you go to chapter 42, you're going to find out the first thing Job did was repented before a holy God, and God restored him. You want to get a blessing in life? You better quit being disobedient, quit blaming God, quit whining, and understand that obedience comes there. Second point of this text, not only must you understand that you have to actually come out of hiding, you got to understand that God come to grips with your call. Come out of hiding and come to grips with your call. You're called as somebody special. I'm talking to somebody. Verse 12 said, an angel of the Lord appeared unto him, and he said, the Lord is with you, mighty man of valor. We get this all mixed up. But can I tell you something? God never sees us where we are. He sees us with how he wants us to be, how he made us. You're actually walking around in a life that God did not create for you. Every time he looks at you, he sees what he created. So when God calls you a mighty man of valor, you better come to grips with your calling, because if not, you won't be able to break the bondages in your life. There can be a lot of things happen to us. If you look at Scripture, God's qualifications are not like our qualifications. You know what happened to God? When God calls somebody, God called like this. Watch me. God says, give me a big sinner. Check. Got that box. Give me somebody who was a fornicator. Give me somebody who smoked drugs. Give me somebody who ran around. Give me somebody who was a liar. Give me somebody who was dishonest. Give me somebody that who will come to me, who will surrender to me, and I will take that person and make them more powerful than anybody else around, because if that person had the heart to be a good sinner, if they can surrender to me, I can make them a better saint. So when God calls you and tells you you have power, don't wait till you get in trouble to try to figure out you have power. Start speaking who God said you are. Somebody I'm talking to right now, I know it doesn't look like you're healed. You ought to holler, I'm healed. Yeah, I know it doesn't look like your family's being blessed, but can you say my family's blessed? Can you get a bottle of oil and run around and anoint your house and tell your people, I'm anointed because the anointing of God is in this house? Can you touch your body and say, I am healed? Can you look at your mind and say, I do have peace? If God called you that, then God said, I can break the bondage if you will just speak it. Peter, biggest braggart there was. Violent man. God called him, and he became a saint. And when he spoke, 5,000 got saved. Mary Magdalene had 7 demons in her, but she was the one who became a disciple who followed Jesus. David went from shepherd to king, from adulteress to one of the first kings to unify God's people. And Apostle Paul was a murderer. But you got to trust what God says you are. I'm talking about coming to grips with your call. Some of you out there suffering because you won't surrender to your call. Some of you out there suffering because you won't be who God wants you to be. You want to be who you want to be. You know what? I found out that this new generation, this generation out there, are a little different than we were. We all sinners. But they want to come in and tell you, now God, I want you to bless me, and I know you're a God of love. Love, love, love. But when you see my disobedience, just look over that. Let me come just as I am and stay just as I am. That's the bad point. We think disobedience to God is something he's going to live with. But God says, you reap what you sow. Then Gideon said in verse 13, said, Lord, if you be with us, how come all this stuff has happened to us? Please don't waste time doing that. Stuff happens to everybody. And then the Lord said unto him, go in this thou might. My might? Ooh, can I help somebody as I'm heading to my clothes?
God said, if you didn't have might, you wouldn't even be here now. You're sitting there saying, I'm weak. How are you weak and you're here to go through what you're going through right now? Oh, come on. Somebody just got a bell. A light bulb just went off in your head. You must not be too weak with all the stuff you've been through. You must not be too weak that you're still able to call upon the Lord. And he said unto him, go in this thou might. What might? The might you had to be out here threshing in the threshing field. Now, you know, when you thresh wheat, you're supposed to be out in the open, but he had to thresh in the wine press, because if he threshed out in the open, somebody said he was scared. Yeah, but what he was scared of was the Midianites coming and take what he had like they did. So what he said was, I'm going to thresh in the threshing field because I'm still going to feed my family. Can I help somebody? You are more powerful than you ever knew. You have survived some things weaker persons have fallen apart from. You are still listening to the word. Give yourself a hand right now. Praise God for where you are right now. Can I get about 5 or 6? Just praise God for where you are now, because if you were not, if you didn't have any might, you wouldn't even know how to pray. You wouldn't even ask God to come. So the might you have is the might that has brought you as far as you have come. This lady was laying in the hospital, and she was in a coma, and they thought she was going to die. But every now and then, when she did arouse, she would speak, they thought, out of her head. And she would say stuff like, just remember how you got here. And she'd fall back out again. This went on a couple of weeks, leading into a month, and the doctor wrote her off. Then miraculously, she came back. And when the doctor came to her to check her out, he said, you know, you had me going there for a while because you were really talking out of your head. And she was able to tell the doctor, no, I wasn't. You don't understand. I was in a battle for my life. There was a battle going on with the devil and Christ fighting for my soul. She said, and as they were fighting, the devil would pull and he would whisper all these nasty things to me and tell me what I couldn't do. And all Jesus would say, I wanted him to say more. Jesus just kept saying, just say, remember how you got here. And every time the devil attacked, I would say, remember how I got here. The devil would pull my soul, and then I would say, remember how I got here. And finally, I said it so many times that the devil left because strength came back in my body. Oh, I'm helping somebody. You better remember how you got here. You better remember the tears you cried. You better remember the days you made promises. You better remember that night when God became plain to you. You better remember that time when you had to pray on. You better remember that if it had not been for the Lord, you would not be where you are right now. God says, surely you will smite the Midianites. God said you shall have victory. First thing you got to do if you want God to be a bondage breaker is you got to come out from hiding. Second thing you got to do is come to grips with your call. And the last thing you got to do is right here in the text, come to a place where you will walk in victory. Now I gave you the context that the children of Israel were in bondage to Midianites. So that meant that they were worshiping Midianite gods. And so God told him on verse 25, well, we started verse 18 where God came to him and said, this is what I want you to do, Gideon. I want you to go out and I want you, now think about this. It said the same night, he had just talked to Gideon. Now he said the same night, I want you to go out and I want you to knock down the idol of Baal. And I want you to cut down the grove where he's at. Then I want you to take your father's bullock and take a second bullock and make an altar unto God. Build it on the rock where everybody was. Here's what he's saying. I'm trying to show you how God took Gideon and made him a person that lost his bondages. How he broke the bondages in Gideon, because Gideon knew they were under Midianite rule. But it said by night he took 10 men with him and they went out to the idol, the statue of Baal, and they knocked it down and they built an altar to God. And the next morning when the people got up, they said, who did this? Watch this. This is how God will raise you up once you be faithful. They said, Gideon, the son of Joash, did it. And all the people, God's people, the Midianites were God's people. The Manasseh were God's people, the tribe of Manasseh. And they're talking about, bring him out here. He just destroyed our gods. And then his father Joash said, wait a minute. If you're following a God that you got to defend, let Baal defend himself. I'll save this for last. Gideon's name. Gideon means warrior. But when he knocked down the idol of Baal, his name became
And that meant Baal killer. Did you get it? He knocked down every idol out of his life. He became the warrior God wanted him to be. And right now I'm telling somebody, you are that close to being special. You are that close to being in power. You are that close to rising up. Come on, shake yourself and start seeing yourself as God sees you. And rise up and know that I can become a Baal killer, an idol killer, a bondage killer. I can let God speak faith into my heart. And I can have enough strength to get victory. The rest of what Gideon did is history. We know about the war. You know, we know about the battle. God said, only take the men who laugh like a dog. All that stuff is good. But I wanted you to see there was a preparation period where Gideon had to come to grips with the fact that he had to break the bondages in his life. Let me close this. Come out of hiding. Be real. Listen to who God said you are. Come to grips with your calling. Know that if God didn't want you, he wouldn't have called you. He called you because you were what he needed. And thirdly, become a Baal killer. Go in, approach those idols, knock them down, and trust God. It's Pastor Duncan saying, grab this message. Please go and support our ministry. We are building up. You know, things are getting tight for folks. We're feeding families. We've been doing so all year. But now is a high time where we're feeding and we're doing our programs. And you can go to our website, Shiloh Baptist Churches, plural.org. And you will find out. Go there and you can give. We thank you tonight for watching today, for watching this message. We thank you for the blessing that you've been to our ministry. And we hope we've been a blessing to you. And if we have, just write in. Share our ministry with someone else. Help this word get out. God bless you. See you next time.